Hello and welcome to the Hellraiser blog. Today's Hellraiser blog is going to focus on the big fight this weekend coming between Chris Eubank Junior and George Groves. I actually thought, when I first heard of this fight coming up, I thought it was quite a simple equation. I thought I know pretty much what I think is going to happen there. But having then gone and questioned a lot of people, whenever I see a fight where I think there's value betting wise, I always go and there's like the same circle of people. I ask them, who do you think? And 9 times out of 10 they'll all have the same opinion as me, and then I think, okay, this is a good value bet. This fight, it's completely split boxing 50-50. I mean, I go through all the different people, and even some people, they seem to have had one opinion 2 weeks ago, and now, oh no, actually I thought about it after you spoke to me. I think I'm going to go that. And it's really, for me, it makes it really an interesting fight. So Chris Eubank Junior, he's the betting favourite. Chris Eubank Junior was built up on terrestrial TV. I actually supplied quite a lot of the opponents for him early on, so I studied him early on. And I've followed him through his career since then. George Groves I've known since he was probably about 10 years old. I remember him in Dale Youth sparring with James DeGale when he was quite a bit smaller than James DeGale because he's younger, and he impressed me straight away. Because James, you could tell, was a good fighter already, and George used to more than hold his own with him, even though he used to give up a lot of size to him. So I noticed him, and I've kept track of him, and I've watched him progress through the professional ranks. I guess he had maybe within boxing he had a high profile, but outside of boxing he was pretty much unknown until he boxed Carl Froch, when obviously a big fight like that, name in the newspapers every day, it sort of began to raise his profile. So Chris Eubank Junior, I think he could certainly be crowned as the social media boxing champion, because his social media platforms are absolutely heaving with followers. He seems to know exactly how to market himself in that way, and I certainly don't agree with everything he puts up, because some things, like say sparring sessions which are very one-sided, for me that should stay in the gym if it's of any value at all. I think it's better kept in the gym. But on Chris Eubank Junior's Instagram, for example, you will find some very one-sided sort of, I'd call them bashings. It's almost not even boxing, just like a smashing guys. And you can't totally fault it, because he has like a big following. He's really, really popular on there, and gets loads of likes, and people they want more of that. So how can you say, like, don't follow that path? He's going with that, and it's worked for him. To me, it is a fight of a lot of misconceptions, because a lot of people said to me, oh, but Groves will have loads of reach on him, how's Eubank going to... Well, there isn't actually that. Groves has a lot of height on Eubank, and this was accentuated by, I remember at the press conference, Chris Eubank was standing with George, and there's a big difference, but George wearing leather shoes with like heels on would have added, he's taller anyway, but that made him look even more taller. But in terms of reach, they're actually very similar. So there's just a whisker between them. George has slightly got a reach advantage, but nowhere near as big as you'd think with that height difference. And I think actually Chris Eubank Junior could cause George some problem, because he's not used to fighting people with that long reach. George certainly seems to have the better jab, for my money. I'd say it's faster. He varies his jab very well. He can use it almost as a range finder. He can use it to really set the right hand up with a sort of stunning jab, if you like. I think there might be some interesting moments early on, because I think when George actually realises, wow, he really has got a long reach, he might have to adapt to that in a way that he doesn't normally have to in lots of his other fights. So Chris Eubank Jr., he's got these freakishly long arms. Does he have the boxing ability to match his social media profile? I'm not sure. We're going to find out. Why am I not sure? Because For me, he's only ever boxed one world-class boxer, one who's currently world-class, because obviously he boxed Arthur Abraham in his last fight. But to me, the fighter that came to fight Chris Eubank Junior in Arthur Abraham was a shadow of his former self. I mean, he looked to me like a money grab. He looked like he'd just come, for me, showed very little ambition, Abraham, and he looked content. When they got to that point where he realised, right, I'm losing the fight, some boxers at that point, or maybe Arthur Abraham's a few years ago, would have gone, okay, I'm losing the fight, so I'm going to go and change tack, or I'm going to now put it all on the line and take some risks. That didn't happen. He just sort of coasted his way through the fight, didn't get stopped, got through it, and was soundly beaten on points. I don't really class that, and you can tell what a phenomenal work rate from Eubanks, but when you're boxing opponents who are not hungry, who are not dangerous, it's easy to have a phenomenal work rate. I mean, on a punch bag you can have a phenomenal work rate, but punch bag doesn't punch you back. George Groves is definitely going to punch him back. George Groves was a highly rated amateur, beat James DeGale, the Olympic Games gold medalist, England rep, turned professional with slightly less fanfare than what Chris Eubank Junior did early on, because he hadn't had the success on the level of, say, James DeGale or Chris Eubank Junior. Managed to get through, probably because of his father and his status, because otherwise, on boxing ability alone, I mean, he would not have got a TV deal. It's as simple as that. He just would not. There was lots of fighters who you would have put ahead of him. But, and Chris Eubank Senior has certainly been widely criticised for the way that he has sort of acted in his dealings for Junior. But one thing that you can't deny, he's taken a fighter who looked very average early on, strong I'd say, but not like a flyer, and he's taken him to some massive paydays, and now to a huge payday and a big fight which could result in him becoming a world champion, which is not easy to do. So I think you have to tip your hat to a degree, no matter how frustrating or what arguments anyone has with Chris Eubank Senior. You have to say he has done a good job in bringing his son through. I don't think that can be disputed. I think you've got to admit that, you know, what he's done has paid dividends for them. One thing I would say about Chris Eubank Senior as well that really stood out to me in the Billy Joe Saunders fight, the advice, I listened very carefully to the advice he was giving to Chris Eubank Senior, Junior, and I thought it was spot on. I thought it was exactly the one chance he had. He was not going to outbox Billy Joe Saunders, but he could grind him down. And the words, which he's not a man of many words, Chris Eubank Senior in the corner, but the words that he did come out with I thought were perfect and got the exact reaction from his son that he needed to get. So I wouldn't say Chris Eubank Junior is proven world class. And also I have a theory that Billy Joe Saunders, before he ran out of steam, you used to see Billy Joe Saunders walking around and he looked mad, and I've probably seen him a few times where I've just thought, do you know what, that guy's never making middleweight again, he's way too big, he ain't going to make middleweight again, no way. And then sure enough, he'd turn up and he would be middleweight, and he would go and box and win again. And I think he did the weight wrong, because when you saw him against Lemieux, different fighter, you know, he seemed to have gears and reserves that he'd never shown before, and if he can stay on his game for that much longer now, there's probably something he's doing differently. You know, boxers evolve constantly, they learn about themselves as they mature, as they move on. And it feels like Saunders has found a way to motor. And I think when he boxed against Eubank, I don't think he'd found how to manage that yet. And I think when a boxer comes in to training camp and he's out here, very quickly the training camp begins to revolve around making the weight, around getting the guy down to the weight that he needs to be. And because of that, what happens is after 3 or 4 rounds, the performance dips significantly and goes to pieces. And I think that's what happened in the Billy Joe Saunders against Chris Eubank fight. And most people's memory of that fight is the second half, certainly, Chris Eubank wailing away with both fists, really high work rate, seemingly nicking a lot of the rounds. And for that reason, people assume, oh, Chris Eubank Junior has got this phenomenal work rate. That's a misconception to me, because most of his fights have been one-sided because the matchmaking's been one-sided, and the fight with Billy Joe Saunders, the only fight he's had at elite world-class level, I don't think Billy Joe Saunders was on his game as he is today. I don't think he made the weight as well as he did, and I think his form dipped in the second half of the fight dramatically, and that allowed Chris Eubank to get those flurries of punches off. Now, if Chris Eubank Junior decides to sit in front of George Groves, how he sat in front of Billy Joe Saunders, I think he's in big trouble. It's one thing sitting in front of someone and getting outboxed, as Chris Eubank Junior was in the first half of the fight with Saunders. It's another thing when you're fighting a thunderous, concussive puncher like George Groves, and the punches are not tippy-tappy arm punches. They're like huge thunderbolts. They're the kind of punches that can take you out in one go. I think a lot of the credibility that Chris Eubank Junior gets for his chin could be either firstly due to the fight with Saunders, where he seemed to walk through a lot of punishment in the second half of the fight that had no impact on him. In the first, it was sort of knocking him back and keeping him like maybe a little bit sort of out of his comfort zone. But in the second half, he seemed to walk through it. Also, the fact that his dad had a phenomenal chin. You know, I mean, he had huge capacity to absorb punishment and to come back from having taken punishment. And because of that, I think people sort of almost assume that his son's got that too. But I'm not convinced. I think his son's still got it all to prove. And we'll certainly find out in this fight, because Groves is a very good, cute boxer. And I actually think his tactics will be to come out to box. I don't think he's going to come out and try and knock Eubank out early. I think he's going to, at first, he's going to purely box Eubank. This isn't inside information. This is just me knowing the fighters and thinking how I think they will be. I think he'll come out. I think he'll outfox Eubank. He'll outbox him. And Eubank, I think, is going to have an issue, because he left it in his own mind. He probably rankles with him that he left it so late to step up the gears against Billy Joe Saunders. Whether it registered with him that maybe Billy Joe Saunders was a lot harder in the first half of the fight than he was in the second half to suss out, because he was fitter and closer to his peak performance. I think what we could see here is a situation where George outboxes, because he, I mean, like I say, he's an ABA champion. He beat James DeGale in the amateurs, outboxed him, was outboxing Carl Froch in the pro in the first fight before he got stopped. I think we'll see George Groves outboxing Eubank. I think then we'll see Eubank being frustrated. I think we'll see him come out of his shell and start to take risks and start to try and do what he did against Billy Joe Saunders, which is sit in front and wind these big shots up and flurries of punches. And for me, that's going to be a big mistake, because George Groves will not tap. He will not box and spin off to the side. George Groves will come right through the middle, and his thunderous punches will find their target on Eubank's jaw. And then we will find out if he has the work rate or the chin that is being vaunted at the moment. You know, that he seems to be getting a lot of credibility for it from people that are assessing the fight, but we don't know that yet. We have absolutely no idea. I mean, I spent 2 weeks with the Eubanks last summer in Las Vegas, and listening to Chris Eubank Senior, I was actually surprised. I didn't expect him to be as astute as he is. He's a very clever guy, and I think I'm really looking forward to. I think Groves goes out, outboxes him. Then I think Eubank's going to start taking chances and start sitting in front of him for longer and starting trying to land these flurries. At which point Groves is going to really tee off on him. I want to see what Eubank Senior, his solutions are to that problem, because I can't see Eubank outboxing Groves. So what does he do? What do you do then? Because you're still going to have a long time left in the fight, and I'm really interested to know what I'll be really. My ears will be pricked. I'll be listening to what Eubank Senior comes out with, because he is a clever guy, and he's going to come out with something. I'm going to be interested to see what. I mean, I question Eubank's work rate. He's shown good work rate, but like I say, mainly against guys who don't throw many punches back. And I think against someone with the skills of George Groves, who we know is going to land accurately throughout, it's really going to push Eubank to the wire in a way that we've never seen before, not even in a fight with Billy Joe Saunders. The question marks I think people have on Froch, one, stamina. I'm not so sure if that, because